Hey guys, welcome back to The Secret Deciphered. So glad to have you here today on this Thursday. It's really windy here in the Midwest, but we're going to roll with it. Makes me think of if I was in an open field, it'd probably be a fun day for a kite flying. I don't know, maybe a little too windy for that. Anyway, I'll get to my kite moment in a second. So I wanted to do a little bit of a video here about a few things. First of all, we're going to touch on German fairies, German authors. We're going to talk about how that relates to the German Painting Month. I know I get a lot of people that say, Karen, why do you always just call it like the German painting or the January painting? And I think there's been some chatter in the secret community about the names of paintings. And I think that, personally, that's a disservice to the painting, to the poems, to the creators, and particularly to Byron, because, Byron Price wanted us to, as he said, use our brains, right? And try to think about all the connections and where these things could be presumed to be. The cities have never been confirmed verbally, every single one of them in video and or in writing, that they are specifically each city to each painting and poem that the community has assumed that it was. And I know people really want to believe, they want to have this group think, and they want to have this confirmation bias based on things that have been said in the past by people that really, I think, never really read the book, don't really understand the book. And so I'm hoping to talk a little bit about that today, as well as our German fairy immigrant groups, or at least some contributors to Byron's thought in the German element, because that's pretty vast, as we know. But anyway, I put together this clip and we'll go through it and then I'll talk about it as we go along, and I'll get it started here. So you have what's in a name, right? Do the secret treasure hunt paintings, do they really need a name? And I put the Mona Lisa up here for a couple of reasons. One is, a lot of us have seen this portrait, and for many years, and even now, we still really don't know who she is. She was possibly the wife of a merchant, but Leonardo da Vinci painted her. And you say, well, why is Da Vinci so important to what we're talking about today? And I have a feeling that he does play a part in the secret book, because Da Vinci was one of the very first people to finitely do drawings of essentially hot air balloons and winged type flight type things and objects. And so sometimes when you hear ancient dreams of flight and you think back to what inspired him to do these drawings, and then of course the painting of the Mona Lisa. And so when we think about that, we finitely know where she is and who painted her. In the secret book, we have paintings that have so many different types of clues and hints in them, with numbers and hidden imagery, that you can't for sure just say it's one thing or the other. And I think it's important to think about that. Furthermore, if we apply the same kind of ideology to poems, I'm just throwing this out here. I don't want to upset people. I don't want people to go, oh my gosh, Karen, that's the St. Augustine poem. How dare you? No. I want us just to think about it. Just to think about it, because Byron would have wanted us to think about it. So if the poems of The Secret of Treasure Hunt tie to a city, and probably the paintings, of which we still don't know, they've not been confirmed, shouldn't we assess the author and meaning tied to them too? So here's your example. Over the tall grass, years pass. Many people, I don't know how they attribute this quote, but this quote was from the character Holden Caulfield in Catcher in the Rye. And this is something that we have to wonder why it's never discussed. We know that Byron mentions the Caulfield maneuver in the secret book. So he's making reference to the Catcher in the Rye. which is a book by J.D. Salinger. And here we have the original book of J.D. Salinger. He was a child product of European immigrants. They were coming over here from, I believe, Ukraine. They're a Jewish family. And of course, we can kind of sense throughout the book, there are some writers that really hold a lot of special meaning to Byron Price. And I think that's why they've been peppered throughout the book. But it's important to understand, who wrote these quotes, what are they tied to and attributed to, and why was Byron using them? And so a possible theory is the quote is part of a reflection on the passing of time and the inevitability of change. So the quote is part of a larger passage in the book, which actually reads, "Years pass, rain falls, things happen, people come and go, and nothing really changes except the people. That's the truth, I guess." End quote. So Holden Caulfield, the character in the book, if you've read Catcher in the Rye, I'm sure many of you have, and maybe some of you haven't, this specific quote is referencing him saving the children in the field that's located by the carousel in Central Park. Now, does that still tie to a Florida poem, a St. Augustine poem? Maybe. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe we could have the poems wrong. Isn't it worth a look? So what does it mean? So in the community, here I say, are we wrong in deciphering of the clues in the poem lines? Do we have the wrong city attached to the poem? Do we have the wrong painting attached to the poem? Have we all been led to believe things can only be solved one way? Possibly. And this is why it's so critical that we do our own research. We look at the writers and the authors and the artists that Byron has put in the book and, thinly veiled hints towards, because there's a deeper meaning to be understood. Because if we don't have creative thought, can you imagine? Imagine if Lewis Carroll never imagined and never had the ability to imagine and write a story about Alice in Wonderland. Or what if these writers were never even allowed to really think? Like the guy from The Wizard of Oz, L. Frank Baum. Or even the Grimm brothers, which gets to my German fairy, because Johann and Wilhelm were, they're timeless writers. They created many, many stories together, mostly Jacob. And he's wrote The Briar Rose, which we know today as Sleeping Beauty, right? Because the German folk tales that they put together tie into a lot of imagination and creative thought for other writers after the Grimm brothers. The Grimm brothers developed the first German dictionary. In fact, they had all the words splayed out except for 2 letters that they didn't complete because of the deaths of the brothers. So they have all this creative magic, and from Briar Rose to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Hansel and Gretel. And it's interesting because some writers, like Hans Christian Andersen and Lewis Carroll, to name a couple, and even L. Frank Baum, felt that these German fairy tales were a little dark, of course, because It involved the death of young people and children. It's kind of a dark fairy tale. And you think about Hansel and Gretel getting lost in the woods, and then they go to this witch's house and the witch boils them up and eats them. It's clearly not, probably kid friendly. So they soften the stories and try to add a more humane element to them, which furthers their, endurability in our minds and in our magical fairy tale thought, when you're allowed to escape the realities of life and go away to this fairy tale land to dream and to think about things and read through adversity and see how you can come out on the other side. The parallels to life are very similar. Avoiding bad people, avoiding being a bad person, trying to get through what struggles you have, whatever they may be. And it's so critical to understand those elements because the Secret Book is kind of written in that vein, that you're learning about some of the people that have come through adversity, some of the people that have created the adversity, and how you can be a better contributor to a better society. And particularly if you read and if we study the past and we study these people and we know who they are, and foundationally and fundamentally, this is where we can go with that. And of course, Walt Disney, he took on a lot of the Grimm's fairy tales and reworked some things for himself and created his own cartoon characters and figures. And I think you know who that is. And so then we have, what do all these creators and many more have in common? So Byron Preiss and Ted Mann and Sean Kelly used the stories from these fairies and fairy tale creators to create the fair people that we see in the Secret of Treasure Hunt book. And the key inside the cask is your reward to unlocking the door of knowledge that led you there. This is what the key actually symbolizes. It doesn't mean, oh, I got the key and I just mail it to the author and the author was going to mail us a gem, because back in 1980, 81, 82, this was the process, right? Snail mail. But what was the meaning? Why did you get a key in a little box? And that was because you unlocked the door to the knowledge that led you there. And that's what Byron wanted. That's what he wanted from all of us. So with that, what do you do? I know it's a lot. It's a lot to process. Been all over the mulberry bush and back. Find your key. Read your books. You assess where you think things are. If you feel comfortable and confident with mentioning to the community where you think they are, I think that's great. I think it's important because all the knowledge that you share, even if the location is wrong, is something that somebody else out there didn't know and can appreciate and maybe even go explore for themselves. So I have to say, whenever you want to be in the mind of the author, following the steps that he wants us to follow, maybe it's okay to not associate a name of a city with a poem or a painting, because maybe we really don't know. Maybe we've been led down a primrose path of group thought for so long that we need to figure out a way to rethink for ourselves. And Byron would want that. I know. So you guys have a super weekend. Thanks for tuning in. Going to post another video here in just a short bit, and we'll go further into the German fairies because there's just so much to learn and understand why they're mentioned in the book. So with that, you guys have a super day. Stay warm, my friends, in cold places, and be warm in the warm places too. Fairy on, guys.